1. Me and my partner are both 26, and this happened about 6 years ago. We both live in the northwest of England. At the time, we were living in Warrington. Not really the best place to live, but it's a long story how we ended up there. We ended up going there as a last-minute decision. Myself and my girlfriend lived in an upstairs flat. At the start, everything was fine. The woman downstairs was okay, but a bit strange at first, and clearly drank too much at night and slept all day. The couple that moved next door, a year after we moved in, was fine, and we got along fine. And the couple that moved in next door but one were nice but two-faced. Anyway, that doesn't really matter. The flat we lived in used to be one house, but was converted into 2 flats. We had the top floor. Our stairs out of the house led out to the backyard area. Our back door faced next door's door, and the crazy woman downstairs' door faced out to the front. So to get from her door to ours, she had to go outside, walk around the house through a large gate, then up a little alleyway to our door. Next door had a large window that looked out onto the alleyway. This is important later. Anyway, the crazy all happened about a year after we moved in. The woman downstairs was in her late 40s, but the drugs she did made her look a lot older. It all started when someone started to scratch my car every night. We would go to bed, wake up, and someone would have scratched my car. We didn't know who it was at first, so we asked neighbors and no one knew. We started to call the police to set a police log, and hopefully they would do more patrols in the area, but they didn't. Every night the same would happen. Sometimes we waited up and nothing would happen until we went to bed. One night we were in bed and the woman downstairs started screaming, "Help!" Fine. Call the police. She was shouting like she'd lost it. We thought maybe someone was hurt and maybe she needed help. She was screaming like crazy for ages, and I had to be up early for work. Me and my missus thought she needed the police's help, so we called them. They turned up and she went quiet. The following day, after I got home from work, the woman downstairs went out and gave me the death stare. As she left, I went upstairs, didn't think anything about it. Later that night, there was an almighty crash downstairs. Someone has smashed her downstairs windows. A couple of days later, after her windows were fixed, we went into the backyard to let our little dog out. We were outside for about 20 minutes. The woman poked her head out the window and said, "I hope your dog has eaten the poison I put out for you, you dirty fucking scumbags." We picked up our dog and went in. Luckily, she never eats anything she finds outside. We didn't take her threat seriously. The following day, the next door's dogs got really sick for no reason, apart from the fact they had been eating the bread that someone had been putting out. We didn't find that part out until later. They were okay about a week later. All went quiet for about a week. Then the guy next door came home in his works van, parked out front one night, and someone scratched the word scumbag and grass into the middle of the side. They knew it was the woman downstairs. She had been arguing with them for a while, apparently. The following night, she went worse. She spent ages getting stoned and smoking so much, the smell was coming through our floorboards. We went to bed, as I had to be up for work at 9. Later that night, she and her guy friend came outside screaming and shouting up at our flat, so loud it woke us up, as they were screaming horrible things at us and threatening to kill us. So scared, we called the police. They came and took the guy home and told her to go to bed. After they left, we were going back to sleep when we heard an almighty banging on the door. I got up slowly and went to the door in the dark. No way I was opening the door at this time of night. I looked through the spy hole, and I couldn't see anyone. Then I heard, "Open up, please, it's PC Jones Warrington. Police." I was about to open the door when all of a sudden she came to the door and banged again. This time I could see who it was. And guess what? It wasn't the police. After about 20 minutes of this happening, she stopped with the whole "it's the police" thing, and started shouting threats at us through the letterbox. I sat atop of the stairs and recorded everything she said on my phone. She even said, "I won't scratch your car, but I know someone who will. Then they'll come round and pay you a little visit." Then she went quiet for about 5 minutes and started again. This happened all night. The following morning, the real police came out and they wanted to question me, wanting to know why I had attacked the woman from downstairs. Apparently I had smashed her face into the wall. I was shocked and had no idea what they were on about. But I played them the recording from last night, and they left to continue their investigations. As they left, the couple next door came out and asked if they could have a word with the police officer about what happened last night. Apparently when the woman was pounding on our door, they were in the kitchen and had a front row seat. In the 5 minutes she went quiet. She walked to the side of the door and hit her own face against the brick wall, and then carried on shouting. Then after each time she closed the letterbox, she would hit her face against the wall again and again. Safe to say the police were as shocked as I was. 2 nights later I was at work. At about 10ish she came around and my missus called me and said, "Don't come home yet. The woman next door was outside on her phone, talking to someone and walking round our flat," pointing up and taking photos of our flat. No idea why. All she kept saying is, "I know she's up there alone right now, and I will help you get rid of her. It would be easy." As soon as I pulled up, she ran back in. A few nights later, she got a big Rottweiler off someone for, in her own words, her own protection. That night she got into an argument with the guy next door. She opened the door and said, "Go on, boy, get him." The dog then ran out and licked him. Safe to say she wasn't too pleased. Later that same night, there was a German Shepherd and his owner walking past, when the woman downstairs opened the door again and let the dog out for no reason. It attacked the German Shepherd and locked his jaw around the dog's neck. She ran back in and locked the door and left the dog there. It took 5 people to pull these two apart and find out where the dog came from. The German Shepherd's neck was a bad mess. A few nights later she got rid of the dog. I was upstairs in the kitchen with the lights off on the phone that night. It was winter and there was a little snow on the ground. I heard her slam her door. I then watched her as she walked up the road, turned and looked up at our kitchen window. Then as she walked past my car, pulled out her keys and ran them all up one side of my car. Then walked round into the middle of the road, looked up at the kitchen again, checked for cars coming, then did the same down the other side of my car. My jaw dropped as I watched this. When I snapped back to reality, I realized what I had just seen. I ran downstairs so angry, my blood pumping so fast. I was shaking. All that was left of her when I reached my car was her bike tracks where she had left. My girlfriend made me calm down and not do anything crazy. I called the police. They came out, took down what I said, and just told me unless she admitted to doing it, there wasn't a lot they could do. All I could do was find out how much it would cost to get my car fixed, and if she admitted, they could try and get her to pay. Long story short, to get my car fixed it would have cost over £3,000. I never got it fixed, and she never admitted to it. Not long after this, we moved out and lived with my family for a couple of months, just until we found somewhere else. We just couldn't take it anymore. As we moved our stuff out into the van with the help of family, she sat in the bedroom looking out the window at us every now and again, like she had done nothing wrong. This woman was totally crazy. When I was growing up, I didn't think that anyone was all bad, and that everyone should be given a chance. But this woman changed everything I believed in. 2. You might be familiar with canvassers if you live in a big city. These people who will either go door to door, sit outside a shopping mall registering people to vote, or take donations on the sidewalks in big cities. There are a lot of things wrong with that system, but that doesn't exactly pertain to this story. It's sad how good I became at this job and how little I cared about my own well-being. The only reason I had this job was that my father wouldn't have to worry about me financially, and, I thought, maybe I was at least doing some good for a charitable organization. What my particular office would do is they would sort us out into groups every workday, and each group would have a leader and a set location that they would travel to. Many of these areas are highly underserved, and they have high homeless populations. I went to one of those areas with 2 guys that I personally enjoyed the company of, and on top of that, they were really sweet to me. Because of this, the shift was at least pleasant for a time. Then, while I was standing, one man came up to me and asked what I was doing. He was very thin, very tall, and got uncomfortably close. His clothing was torn, and I think, although I don't remember for certain, that he'd been sitting at the nearby bus stop up until the point that he'd come up to me. I remember the way he looked at me, at first blank, then like I was a piece of meat. This guy was pretty out of it too. He seemed to be high on something, very fidgety. Now, when someone asks me what I'm up to, what I'm doing, or if I've flagged someone down, there's a scripted pitch that I'm supposed to give them. That's how I get donations. This man scared me, but I reprimanded myself for being paranoid and judgmental. Then, in the middle of my scripted pitch, he tried to kiss me, and then, when I refused, made a bunch of kissing sounds. I locked eyes with one of my co-workers, I'll call him Matt. I walked towards Matt, leaving the man who I'd been giving my pitch to stand there for a bit before coming after me. Mind you, with the way I was standing and the way that he was worrying, Matt could have passed as a family member or even partner, though I'd never do that. I didn't have the chance to explain before this man walked up to us. I was shaking and about to cry. Matt eventually got the guy to leave. Then the other guy I was working with saw that something was the matter, and he came up to ask about it. I'm pretty sure that that guy who tried to kiss me was picked up by police officers. I couldn't get this image out of my head. When I got back to the office and explained the situation, they had me sit down and talk about it. But I could tell that this was a formality, and they didn't really care about me or my well-being. They expected that I'd show up the next day, and I'd love to say that I didn't as an act of rebellion, but I did. This whole thing was kind of a wake-up call. I started being more cautious about the situations that I put myself into. If I don't care about myself or put in any effort, it's hard then to give back to other people. 3. My great-grandmother passed away around 40 years ago, when my mum was a young teenager. She passed suddenly from a heart attack. Shortly after her death, my mother started having night terrors. She would wake up screaming every night for weeks because in her dreams my great-grandma would appear floating down towards her with her arms outstretched. My mum loved her grandma, but she was only young, and this dream made her think the grandma was coming to kill her or bring her to the other side, and she would wake up terrified. This might be passed up as a child's imagination. However, in the dream, the dead grandmother was surrounded by 5 little angels of all different ages. What my mum couldn't possibly have known at the time was that my great-grandma had 3 sisters and 2 brothers who all died in childhood from diphtheria. She was not told about this, as she was only young when she started having the dreams, and it wasn't something you would generally want to tell a child about. Skipping forwards a good 30 years, I'm now a teenager myself, and my mother and grandma had moved countries back to the UK. They decided to have my great-grandmother's ashes shipped over to England from Australia, to have her buried under a tree of life, where they can visit her grave. It might be important to add, I've never actually seen a picture of my great-grandma. Anyway, her ashes arrived under awaiting burial. Shortly after having the box in our house, I have a nightmare where I'm stood in our dining room, and there's a ball of light floating towards me from the ceiling of the conservatory. In the dream I was terrified, as this ball would appear, float towards me, fade away, and then reappear and come towards me again, each time getting bigger and clearer. Then I saw her. She finally manifested and it was an old lady who looked just like my grandma does now, but with speckled white hair. She floated towards me, her arms outstretched. I woke up, shaking and terrified, but I just knew, that I had seen my great-grandma. I don't talk about this for a long time, but a few weeks ago I have my mother around at my house. I'm now an adult in my own home. We're talking about what we think happens after death and other such cheery subjects, when I mentioned that I think I'd seen great-grandma in a dream, even though I have never met her. This is when my mum tells me about the dream she had when she was little. My mum said I described my great-grandma's appearance perfectly, without even seeing her. But then it gets weirder. I go on to describe how in my dream the ghost had a golden white glow around her, and she faded away at the thighs, so she basically didn't have legs. My mum gasped a bit at this and teared up. Something she had never mentioned when she had told people about her dream was that the grandma was glowing and faded away at the legs. It was a perfect match. I still can't understand how 2 people can have almost identical dreams about the same person almost 30 years apart, and at almost the same age. My mum goes on to tell me the story of my brother seeing something as a baby. She had thought it was just a creepy baby thing, but telling it back, we realized something. When my brother was only a few months old, he would stop whatever he was doing and stare at the ceiling and start smiling. Strange, but as he got older, he would start smiling and giggling as if whatever it was would make him happy. And then he would put his arms out in front of him and do the pick-me-up motion at the thin air. We have only just pieced that together, that the grandma always appeared with her arms out ready to hug, and that whatever my brother was seeing was making him happy, and he wanted it to hug him or pick him up. I can't explain this, but I would say if there is such a thing as ghosts, then there's one following my family and keeping an eye on us, trying to tell us that she's still around and that there is something on the other side. I'm not sure how to feel about this, if it's just a crazy coincidence or something else, but I would like to think it's real. 4. I'm female, and this happened when I was about 5 or so. Being on the slightly larger scale growing up caused me to obviously be slower, physically, than most kids my age. When this occurred, me and my sister, about 2 years older than me at the time, were walking into a store. My mother had sent us into the store looking for milk or something cheap, because my sister was only handed a $5 bill. For me being only 5, I was very observant, and walking into the store I already knew something was up. Glancing around, I saw a group of young males, about 20 or so. Being the pudgy, nervous kid I was, I started freaking out. I told my older sister, but she didn't think anything of it, but tried to pull me along faster before I could have a meltdown. She walks faster and I'm not able to catch up. Before long, I can't even see my sister. Before you freak out about my mother letting her 7-year-old and 5-year-old in the store by themselves, she had been right outside the whole time, so she knew we weren't going to leave without her knowing. I can't see her, so I try to get back to the entrance of the store to wait for her there. As I am walking, I see the group of guys looking at me and talking. And not smart me decided to just stand there and watch them talk and look at me. The fear hadn't hit yet, but was manifesting slowly through my gut. One of what I thought was the younger guy there started walking over to me, and this is where I panicked. I started shaking. He walked up to me and looked down at me, but he didn't seem threatening, just curious. "Is your mom here, sweetie?" he asked me kindly. I just looked at him petrified. "It's okay, hon," he said after a few seconds of silence from me. He gently touched my arm and said, "Do you want to meet my friends?" And that's when I started screaming and crying. Everyone around us just stopped and stared, making the guy back up. Never mind then," he said quickly and followed his friends who were already leaving quickly. My sister then found me, and with buying our things took me outside to our mother, who didn't even ask what was wrong. Just assuming I had a fit, she hauled me to the car, and I never saw them again. 5. This happened a few years after the Shadow Hat Man, when I was still with my biological mother. She and my grandma, her mother, had a tailoring shop. They rented a unit that is divided as a commercial on the front and residential in the back. The toilet was only accessible through the house, and I badly needed to go. I was a scaredy cat when I was a kid, even though I liked watching horror movies. I had no choice but to go alone, because they were so busy and rushing. There was nobody at home. It was dusk time, so it was dark in the house. Only a dim light from the outside. I needed to go through a long, dark corridor. I wasn't expecting anything to happen, that I even glanced at a painting on the wall. When I looked into it closely, I recognized the woman in the painting was the owner. She was with a man that I figured to be her husband. It was fascinating because it looked so real. I was an artsy kid. The woman looked happy. The man was wearing a poker face. While still looking at the painting, I continued walking towards the toilet. Wait. The man in the painting that looked so real didn't break eye contact with me, even though I was a few steps away. And I suddenly noticed a change in his expression, like an angry landlord who saw a stranger in his house. Fight or flight mode, I almost ran, not outside the house but into the toilet. It was funny remembering it now. It was so bad I chose the toilet. I dreaded the way back. I mustered up the courage to go out and just decided to not look at the painting. I succeeded by walking fast, but in the corner of my eye, I am still aware of the painting. Even though I was a meter away, I could see the eyes of the man in the painting. When I got out, I told them what happened in a panic. The story reached the owner, the woman in the painting. It wasn't my imagination after all. Her husband just died recently, in that house. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Subscriber Stories, episode 74. And thank you very much to everybody who sent in stories for use in this video. If you have a story yourself you'd like to send me, please do send it along to kingofthecities@gmail.com. I'll take submissions from any genre. All I ask is that you be as detailed as possible, and if you can remember, put what type of story it is in the subject line. It just makes it a little bit easier for me when I'm sorting stories into folders. Okay, I think I'm just going to wrap the outro up there for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.